Welcome to the Autistic Community Summit breakout session, and thank you for being a vital part of our community. A few notes before we begin. Please silence your cell phones and any other devices you might have with you. For the in-person attendees, if for whatever reason you're also viewing the position on a device virtually in Zoom, please mute that device. In your summit program, you can find information on downloading the presentation handouts. Please note a few accommodations to make this conference more accessible. We ask that instead of clapping out loud, you use ASL clapping. Are familiar? Yep. We offer a quiet space in room 125, but please see the map in your program. Our sincere thanks to all our sponsors for helping us make this summit what it is. Special shout out to our platinum sponsor, Minnesota Independence College and Community. So thanks to MyCC, we're very grateful for your support. Presenting this session are Isabelle Morris and Jessica Seitz. Did I say that right? Cool. Isabelle Morris is an autistic, multiply disabled PhD student studying developmental psychology. She has been described by others as possessing an uncanny canine knowledge and a dry sense of humor. Receiving her diagnosis at age 19 changed her life for the better and focused her academic interest. Her current research looks at autistic experiences of stimming. Isabelle is passionate about creating opportunities for more autistic adults to be involved with research and created Radar, a participatory research project to do just that. She lovingly refers to Radar as Autistic Club, where we happen to talk about research. Jessica is also a late diagnosed autistic, ADHD PhD student studying autistic and neurodivergent communication and language abilities with a minor in developmental psychology. Previously, Jess worked clinically as a speech and language pathologist in multiple settings with autistic. Therapist. Sorry. Oh, wait. And neurodivergent individuals across the lifespan. Current research includes autistic perspectives about the communicative value of stimming, diversity and equity, and intersectionality within the community. Participatory, I love that word so much. Research approaches and community engagement are areas of passion with the goal of ensuring our voices are heard and valued in the research for, by, and with autistic and neurodivergent communities. They love animals, running, and disability advocacy. Please welcome Isabelle and Jessica.
Okay.
First questions, do you all prefer them at the end, or
we'll explain that
perfect
on like 2 slides now.
Okay, let me know what you need.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're both really excited to be here. It's our first time at the Autistic Community Summit. We're absolutely loving it and getting to with other autistic people. So the title of this talk is called Radar: Research on Autism Driven by Autistic Researchers. The project that I created. That you just got the overview of the bio, so I'm not going to rehash it too much. But I also wanted to give a visual description of myself. I'm a white passing Mexican American female with long dark hair. I'm seated in a manual wheelchair. I'm wearing black pants, a gray tank top, and white band. And when I talk about autism myself, I use identity first language.
Yes, so my idea is I am a white, non-binary, autistic ADHD. I am in a gray shirt with rainbow flowers, and it says, can you read it upside down? Embrace neurodiversity, not all grace, minus think alike, with a black and white cardigan over it. And I also use identity first language for myself. I honor whatever the person I'm speaking with will do. And yeah, my special interest for all the things.
Yes.
All the things. That can you have a better
So for this presentation, I wanted to give a little outline, kind of a roadmap of where we're going. So first, just a high level kind of overview.
Hi. Oh, thank you so much.
Research, what are we actually doing? And then talking about participatory research, a word that's hard to say, but really important to do in your research. Sorry, I made you read it 6 times. And then I'll give an overview of the radar project itself, before talking about our first study, and the results from that. I was looking at autistic stimming, and then we want to save a good chunk at the end for Q&A and really discussion and an opportunity to have the autistic community give us feedback on what we're doing. To that end, we have a Google form set up, so if people have questions, things that you think about as we're going, you can either access the link. These slides are up on the website wherever they are. You can click the link that way, or without your phone, like I see people doing, scan the QR code. It should take you to a Google form. You can submit as many questions you want. They're anonymous. If you have like clarifying questions, something I say doesn't make sense, I'm using a word you're not familiar with, please by all means jump in, and you don't have to wait to the end for those questions.
Still wish I knew what the recipe was to do the making of the sounds.
That's a good question. That's basically research in a nutshell.
I know.
That's it. You've given the talk for us.
You made it very concise.
So I'll go ahead and dive in to introduction research. Sorry, before we move on. Was that enough time for people to grab the QR code who wanted it? Or do you want me to go back?
Can we get, did you say that it was gonna be in material?
Yes, they are in the materials. And we will also put this back up when we transition to the question time. But just so people can
So
be jotting things down.
if you don't have a phone or something for a QR code, please feel free to write it
On a note card, yeah, whatever
Yeah,
works for you
whatever
guys.
is accessible for y'all.
And I'll just also add, I'm most practiced in giving talks to other people who are very specialized in doing the same thing I'm doing. So if I use terminology or explain something that's not clear, that's not because you don't know what you're talking about, it's because I'm doing a bad job of communicating to people who don't already know everything I'm saying. So don't feel like embarrassed to ask a question, or that you should know something. It's always good learning for me to, oh, right, yeah, that doesn't make sense to most of the world.
Ditto same.
Okay, so what is research? The recipe to figuring out the sense, as was already mentioned, but it's a process that we use to learn about the world around us, and that includes people, why we do things, how we do things, learn, and the process we use that you might have heard in elementary school or later called the scientific method. And so using the scientific method, we ask questions, we come up with our predictions or hypotheses, what we think will happen, then we design our studies, we can test those predictions and see if they're right or we find something surprising. We make conclusions, interpret the results, and then importantly, we also go back and share the results. Most of the time in research, that means we're publishing in a journal that only other science people read. But I'm trying to advocate that we should also be going back to the community directly with our results instead of putting it in a journal somewhere that no one will see. And then we ask new questions, and it starts all over again. And so there are many kind of stages to the research process. A lot of times the research process starts with what we call a literature search. So we go and look at what has already been published, what people have found before. What do we already know? And I've used icons throughout here. I've used consistent to help identify these stages. So for the literature search, let's use a magnifying glass. The next thing we do is ask a question. Here's a question mark in a thought bubble. What do we still want to know? And these ideas might come from gaps in the literature. We could get the answer we are looking for from what's already published, discussions with other researchers or community members, or even, especially in something like this, our own lived experience. And then we make a prediction or a hypothesis, which I symbolized with a little light bulb that's on, which is really at its core, what do we think will happen? And these hypotheses, again, can come from what previous researchers have found, our own lived experience, discussions with other community members, etc.
So what appeared above people's heads before the light bulb was invented?
I don't know, I wasn't around for that.
Fire.
And the, so the next stage is to create a procedure, which here I've indicated with a little flow chart. And this procedure says, what are we going to do to test that question, to test that hypothesis? And then we start collecting data. Here's a little check marks on a clipboard. We follow the procedure exactly the way we said we would, and hopefully that lets us kind of get an answer to our question. We analyze the data, which here is a picture of a bar chart. And then we publish our results, either journal article or something like this, which is why there's a little picture of someone funding kind of whiteboard, basically. And so we share what we learned with other people. Because learning for research is great, but it's not that helpful if we don't tell them what we've learned. And so I definitely have this expectation, and I think that it's probably because how we're taught it at school is it's this linear process that starts with the literature search and goes all the way through a straight line into publication, which is what you see on the timeline here. As arrow that goes from literature search through question, hypothesis, procedure, data collection, analysis, and publication. But it turns out research is actually messy. We might have a question and then go back to the literature and say, I wonder if anyone has looked at that before. Or we might start collecting data, which we did in our study, and go, those videos, that's not working. We need to change this for whatever reason. Or we start analyzing our data and we might be surprised by our result. And so now we have a new question. Or we analyze our data and come up with a new hypothesis because we're surprised and that's not what we expected at the time. So research is very messy, and even though I laid it out first, like it goes in order, sometimes it does. Usually it's a lot more complicated.
So I think everybody probably has a basic understanding of traditional research approaches. Traditional research oftentimes tries to make generalizations about a concern or problem, looking at that concern, problem, or issue from the outside in, instead of using the community insight and lived experience to help, trying to find word, steer, I guess. And a lot of times also think lab studies, just that's kind of a good way to think. It can also be like self-initiated to satisfy the researcher's own curiosity, but participatory and applied ways help find like a solution to a specific problem that people in the community. So like we discussed before, in the what we expect in traditional research is that linear start to finish, and then you're done, publish, blah blah. But in this type of research, we're excited about getting the community involved because it gives insight from the inside out versus what people project from the outside in. And it's just, instead of just having another question that's of interest, this can be more impactful and beneficial for the community as a whole.
Yeah. So traditional approaches to research really only bring in community members here in that data collection phase, which is the highlighted icon here. So the researchers are coming up with the questions, designing the methods, all of that, then going and saying, hey, will you take my study? Okay, bye-bye. And then I get to interpret the results on my own without asking you what you think. And that's typically.
Yeah, and we get to, I don't know, like in the keynote talking about constructing your own spaces, it's kind of what we did in an online forum in a way, so that we can co-construct knowledge from the very beginning, instead of just like, can we use you for our own knowledge? So in participatory research, the community is engaged from the very beginning and participates face through the entire process, helping to actually formulate the questions, drive the process, pose new perspectives, problems, ideas, collect the data, analyze data, and write it up.
On or for. And that's kind of summed up by the common phrase in the disability community, nothing about us. And again, there are many different approaches, and there's no one best approach in all of them. Radar isn't based on one specific model that we followed exactly to the letter, but we've broadly pulled from different traditions, including civic science, community-based participatory research, and participatory action research. And so in building Radar, I actually used what's known as the design thinking approach. And in design thinking, there are 5 key modes. The first being empathize, which is you start to, based on design, so we're thinking about users, so getting to know what your user wants and needs. During the define stage, you come up with a problem statement, which identifies your user, their needs, and any insights you gained from the empathize phase. Then the ideate phase, it's really just coming up with ideas or brainstorming. Then prototyping, it's kind of a quick and dirty, easy, first pass of a solution. It could be anything that a user could interact with. So it could be a post-it on a wall, it could be a mocked up little gadget, and then testing, take the product or project or whatever to the same people that were your users in the beginning, and get feedback and hopefully improve that each time. And what's really important about design thinking approaches is that it's not linear on purpose. So that means that moving forward from empathizing to defining isn't any better than moving back from ideating to empathizing. And using this approach to designing this project was a deliberate choice. I know for me, given the choice, my brain wants things to be as linear as possible, as rigid as possible, and as perfect as possible. And I knew that I didn't really know how to succeed at what I was trying to do, but I knew that was a really good way to fail. And so by using a design thinking approach that's intentionally iterative, it enabled me to kind of let go a little bit of the anxiety of it not being good enough for having it to be perfect the first time, and just kind of take that next step. So what this looks like, for this project in the empathize phase, I interviewed autistic adults as well as non-autistic researchers who were doing participatory research with autistic adults. And then I came up with some ideas for the project structure, made a presentation, gave those presentations in lab meetings, brought that back to service providers, participatory research providers, other autistic adults to get feedback. And after several rounds over a couple months of this adjusting, tweaking new ideas, officially launched the project in March of 2022, which was terrifying. Putting my baby out into the world and not knowing what was going to happen with it, but it was, it's been great so far. And so Ritter's mission is to contribute rigorous, ethical, and useful autism research by building a collaboration of autistic researchers to conduct experiments, generate data, and communicate new information about the lives, experiences, and needs of autistic people so that research about us is no longer conducted without us. And you'll note that there's asterisk next to the word researchers, that's because we intentionally include autistics who are not formally part of academia, would fall into that bucket of, I think, like, first thing when we hear researchers, but I think that all autistic people should have a voice in research, and therefore that makes them a researcher. And so again, our goals to conduct research rigorous, ethical, and informed by the autistic community, to create a safe, inclusive, and accessible environment, to provide opportunities for autistic individuals to build and enhance their research skills. My big lofty goal is that I would love to help make inclusive participatory research an expectation of all serious autism research. So instead of, oh wow, what a nice thing, you have to ask an autistic person to be involved in this. I would like to get to the point in as the field where when you submit a paper, the reviewers ask, okay, question, but did you have autistic people involved in this? We're not there yet, but that's what I'm trying to push the field that way. And importantly, as much as I struggle with change, it's really important to me and for my own personal growth, but for the project as well, to evolve and grow in response to feedback and changing needs. I'm really excited to be able to present in this kind of forum where I have a whole bunch of autistic community members who can give me that back.
Yes, so our project structure is meant to be accessible. So we use a twice monthly Zoom meetings that were predetermined date and time collaboratively. We also work independently on like the passion areas of the project that we're involved in between meetings, and then we work collaboratively on other things such as like writing a manuscript and different things. And like earlier, the flexible involvement of if people need to take a break or if people want to be more involved, kind of just makes room for our community to actually be involved, and not just involved on a surface level, but engaged as deeply as they would like to be. And then, as stated before, we, like, collaborators have, they can be involved from the entire process and have all of that. So it's a really great experience. We have 5 to 8 collaborators at a time, and we try to represent or have representation for as many diverse identities and intersectionality identities that we can. We definitely want to, I think I can speak for both of us when we say we want to diversify autism research in all the ways, kind of like all of the things. We are still working to broaden the support needs and in that area, we're trying to get more people on board. And then we also pay collaborators through this. So my experience over the past year-ish has been basically these bullet points. It's been rigorous because it is work. I mean, research is work. And, but it's been renewing work at the same time because you're engaged with people who kind of think, communicate, and be in the world similarly to yourself. So I feel like it's a safe space and also for growth and also for risk taking, where if something doesn't go perfectly, no one's at fault. And this has built our community and our allies and given us all kind of this social club where we work on our interests in our research areas. And we get to co-construct our own culture versus assimilating into the pre-existing culture that is just academia. Not that that's bad, I'm just saying.
So our first deliverable project that we're going to put out there is this essay that we wrote as a group called "What is Autism? An Introduction to the Autistic Perspective." We specifically designed it to be written in plain language, to be consistent with current research, but also not based in a pathology paradigm. So highlighted our strengths and different ways of interacting with the world. And this essay was published on the Radar website last fall, and there's also, if you go to the website, there are also recordings you can listen to read each section of it, so you don't have to read it. So what I've learned over the last year and a half, it's been a lot. First, you don't actually have to have any idea what you're doing to start doing something. And I've had those days I still feel like I don't really know what I'm doing and just making it up as we go along. The next is participatory research takes a lot more time and effort compared to traditional research approaches, but it's so worth it. And as was mentioned earlier during the keynote, finding those allies and building that network is absolutely crucial. And I've been really lucky to have support my department that has helped facilitate that. So now I'm going to transition us into talking about our stimming study. So I'm not going to belabor the definition of stimming, but just a quick note on terminology so we're all clear on what I'm talking about. It's short for self-stimulatory behaviors. It's something that historically has been deemed as functional by non-autistic people. But it turns out when you ask autistic people, there are a lot of functions to it. Surprise, surprise. And there are infinite ways to stim. These are just 3 examples of someone in a ball pit on trampoline fidget spinner. But we're really considering this a broad category. And this, again, is a really good example of how participatory research works. I was planning to create a task for emotion recognition using videos of stimming, right? So if we show you a video of these hand flaps or these hand flaps, can autistic people tell the difference? I was actually not planning to do the study I'm about to describe. The current study emerged by valuing my collaborators' interests and is a way better idea than what I was going to do the first time. Because there's so little research on how specific stims relate to emotion in autistic adults or people in general, this actually puts us in a better position to develop that task later on. I love telling people that their idea was better than mine.
So coming to our study aims, we wanted to really kind of dig in and understand autistic adults' perceptions and real life experiences of stimming and how stimming from their lived experiences or shared lived experiences can assist with emotional regulation, self-regulation, communication, expression of yourself, and just kind of how it plays into all our intersectional identities, and how it also may play a part in masking or may not, in social relationships. We were curious to see if stimming, we just wanted to see. It was like, no, we started with and it got broad. So, but we basically want to see how stimming and different behaviors of stimming and emotions are tied together.
And so here I'm gonna get a little into the weeds of the details. If you don't understand every single thing I'm talking about here, totally fine, this is a great time to ask questions. So this is what we call a mixed methods study, meaning we collected two different kinds of data. So the first section or type of data we collected was on a survey. We asked about autism related identities and those experiences and perceptions of stimming. We had about 130 people participate in that we included at the end. And after that, we have a follow-up interview with a small subset of study participants to kind of get more context and detail than get on a survey. I'm not going to go into the analytic design here, but if people want to know that, we can definitely chat about that later. And so the results. I'm going to talk a bit more about demographics than you might expect because ours are intentionally different. And I brought that. So we asked about sex assigned at birth, and 61% of our participants reported being female identified at birth, which is interesting and in contrast to the 4-to-1 male to female diagnosis ratio that you typically see. Gender identity, we have a separate question because we know there's a big overlap between autistic and LGBT+ identities. And so on this bar graph, you can see that we have, even though we have 61% people who identified as who were female identified at birth, 54% identified as female for their gender, 34% as male, 13% as non-binary, 7% as trans, and 1% as agender. For anyone trying to do the math and add that to 100, it doesn't add to 100 because people could select multiple categories. So for example, if someone said they were female, non-binary, and trans, they got counted each of those instead of trying to figure out all the complicated combinations that would be. And which is the same way we did it on the next slide for race and ethnicity. And so this is one area where we were not as successful in being as diverse as we wanted to be, but it's still better than a lot of what you'll see reported in research. So here we had 43% participants reporting that they identified as white, 43% identified as Black, 16% said that they were Hispanic, again, ethnicity regardless of race. And we had somewhat fewer participants identifying as Asian, 8%, Native, also 8%, and 3% co-identified other, which like HPI on the graph. And again, people could be in multiple categories. So we made a really deliberate choice in this study to include people that both have a professional diagnosis of autism and self-identify as being on the spectrum without professional diagnosis. Previous literature hasn't really showed a difference between the two when it comes to stimming. And given this is an online survey anyway, verifying diagnoses, it didn't make any sense for us to kind of exclude that group. 29% reported having an intellectual disability label, which is actually pretty close to the estimate of overall prevalence of intellectual disability in the autistic community, which is right around a third, 35%. And we also had a variety of a range of support needs. 19% reporting high support needs, 46% moderate support needs, and 36% lower support needs. So returning to our main kind of study aims here, we wanted to know, is stimming generally a positive or negative experience? 33% said that it was always or usually a positive experience, and only 8% said that it was always or usually negative. Most people, 60%, were somewhere in the middle, where it's sometimes positive, sometimes not.
Is that question specifically asking the autistic individual how they feel?
Yes,
about their
these are
stimming?
all questions to autistic people that they're reporting for themselves. We specifically in our survey said, if you need a support person to help you with this, awesome. The parents, caregivers, support people, do not fill this out on behalf of anyone else because you cannot actually answer to you like this. That's impossible. So yes. And when we asked about, what made stims positive or negative, the ones that people were reporting as negative were either self-injurious in some ways, harmful, or socially stigmatized.
Ask about the intellectual disabilities, was that just as they define themselves, or was there some?
Yeah, so it was just a question of I think the statement was, I have been given an intellectual disability label.
So just.
Yes, no.
Anything.
Yeah, yes, no, or unsure, I think. And these were all optional questions people could prefer, prefer not to say or just skip.
So saying those support needs.
Yes, yeah, so we weren't directly assessing anything, it was just what people reported to us. Which I think is often is more helpful, getting to know what people themselves.
Needs change too, depending on, again, from a moment to moment. Sometimes.
Exactly,
I
yes.
can go from
We're going into the
rates.
Yeah, exactly.
And like she said, like definitely can oscillate and fluctuate within our own self, minute to minute. Yeah.
So masking is interesting. We asked a similar question, is masking positive or negative? There's a pretty even split, about a third across the board, positive, negative, or sometimes both. But when we asked why people masked, it was some combination of being trained not to do it, so they're punished as a kid, to avoid negative reactions from other people, or stigma, or just like safety. So it really seems like people are reporting the outcomes of masking being positive. It gets me the thing that I want, or helps me avoid the thing I don't want. Not that the process of masking was actually enjoyable, but that's something that in our follow-up interviews we'll be able to get a little bit more context and new. Yes. So that's why we're doing mixed methods and getting this interviews, because right, if you just look at this data, it's intuitive to us as autistic people that like, oh yeah, this isn't because masking is fun. But like you look at the numbers, it kind of looks like some people say masking's fun. But like, great, so it's how you're interpreting the question. And so that's why we ask us all questions. We go to the community and everyone chuckles at the fact that yeah, masking's not fun. Why would that be? What does this mean?
A weird participatory thing right here. I was very surprised by that even distribution. I was just wondering, like, if people would just raise their hand about if they were surprised reading that breakdown was so even that way. It really was something that.
Yeah.
No lie, we were too.
Yeah, which is why I think it was we didn't make the question clear of what we wanted to know. Is masking a process that you find enjoyable? And I think a lot of people responded with, oh yeah, masking's great because I get what I want. And those are two different things, but we weren't clear. And so, and that's why researchers method, you get results and you go, I knew a new hypothesis, we need to go back and re-ask things. It's not a straight line. Yep. And now turning to my favorite part of the study, we were talking about the role that stimming plays in neurodivergent social interactions and relationships. So we had a statement that said, stimming is an important part of my friendship with other autistic or neurodivergent people. And a majority, 57%, said that they strongly or somewhat agree. I liked your idea of participatory approaches. So, and does anyone want to raise their hand if they agree with this statement, that it's an important part of your friendship with autistic people?
I go to the school myself, so all my friends are autistic.
Yeah, so we have, so good for that one. Another question I had for statement was, stimming helps me connect with other autistic and neurodivergent people. Yeah, and we had, again, 64% that said, yes, that is true. And potentially my favorite question and results was, when I see other autistic or neurodivergent people stimming, I can usually tell what they're feeling. And 73% of our participants, almost 3/4, said yes.
I need to get a beat on the person first.
Yeah, it's context dependent. But I think
Like, one person texts, another person.
exactly right. But the fact that we're able to do it at all goes against what the research says about us and our abilities, and the idea that stimming is useless or has no purpose. We just give you a bunch of purposes.
No, in the earlier slides, you described stimming as allegedly non-functional, but maybe we could unpack what functional means, because it has a function kind of regardless of how you understand it, but
It
whether or
does.
not it's intentional or conveyed in meeting versus kind of
Yes,
random.
right.
Yes.
Yeah, so going back to that historical perspective, you'll see it in research articles a lot. It's put input, this is a non-functional behavior. Not just people decide that it's not functional. Yeah. Which, it's silly. They didn't ask us. We could have told them all the functions of it. Wait, so they wasted a lot of time and money.
They could have done this like how many different?
And so we also were looking at the specific relationships between emotions and stimming. So we had a question, I stim when I feel, and check all apply. The most common reason for emotions that people reported stimming for were that are anxious, excited, frustrated, angry, and then less kind of like in pain or tired. And then we also looked at these pairings between emotions and specific behaviors. There's a lot of variability, but there's also kind of patterns that emerged. So for example, you know, hand flapping when excited, spinning or jumping when excited, biting or chewing or pacing when you're anxious or angry, like that. And so the summary here is that our sample was not perfect, but it's better at reflecting the diversity of autistic adults' experiences than a lot of research. Our community engagement work that we did up front allowed us to pretty quickly recruit a relatively diverse sample. Stimming is frequently experienced positively by autistic adults. Turns out it's important in neurodivergent social interactions and has a communicative function that can be interpreted by autistic adults. And so the next steps for us to conduct a replication study, meaning we're going to do a very similar study again, where we're just recruit more autistic people. We'll have another, hopefully that survey is going live next week. We'll want to be involved in that. We have an opportunity for that. And eventually want to use these findings to create the autistic emotion recognition task. I see hands. I'm going to give us can I get like 30 seconds? Okay. So acknowledgements, I want to acknowledge the developmental social cognitive neuroscience, early language experience labs that I work in. My collaborators, Aisha, Blue, Prius, Freya, Jess, Cal, Katie's in the back, Lauren, Morgan, Scott, and Zach, and our wonderful RAs, Jenna, Molly, and Harith, who could not have done this without. And so we're going to give everyone a 3 to 5 minute self-regulation break. We know that an hour is a long time. That will also give us a chance to kind of read any of the questions that have come through. We'll put that back up, but we also have questions for you that like we came up with. We'll put those up as well. We really want y'all's opinions and feedback. Yeah, so we'll put this up there for a minute. Yeah, if you who had questions can go ahead now.
When we were talking about real life experience, why are there lives that aren't real?
Oh my God, that's such a great point, right?
That's true. Good question.
Is there any study that, I mean, it sounds like this study was specifically asking adults with autism, and I'm just wondering if there's any future potential for doing more research with.
Yeah,
children and
absolutely,
adolescents?
absolutely. So my plan is to kind of move that age group down. In the research process, there are a lot of hoops to jump through as far as our regulatory people telling us what we're allowed to do and not do.
Yeah,
They often categorize people with disabilities as vulnerable populations, which means we have other things to do. Minors are also vulnerable populations. And doing a double combo, I was like, you know, let's just try to get my study off the ground, see if they'll let me do it. But I absolutely do want to.
I deal with a lot of marketing research for a living, and there are additional rules for minors and teenagers. It's not much unlike what they're doing, and so.
Privacy laws. And
I mean, I've even done it in different countries, and there are rules on what specific, like in the EU, there are
You can't ask
specific
about race.
rules.
France, Germany.
And you have to let them know what their privacy rights are.
Yes.
And
Even as a programmer, I have to know this stuff.
And like where you're coming from the developmental side, and we're going down in age. Yes. I'm actually kind of wanting to go up in age and look at aging and autism.
I'm sorry, this, the one with all of the. All of the different behaviors,
Yeah,
that page is just, you want to flip really fast.
yeah, I want to try to tackle the
Okay,
discussion,
yeah,
but I can
okay.
definitely give you that.
Okay, thank you.
And vulnerable populations. I wish I had one of those stars to become an invulnerable population. So.
We really do.
I have a question from online.
Yes.
With stimming, I feel like no one said focus. I use it to focus and get things done. And yes, doing minor disabilities would be so hard.
Yeah, so some people did, we did have focusing on there. It was about 25% of people. And we'll, you know, when we do our follow-up study, we'll see if those numbers change. Oh, because I have to do it.
I Yeah, I honestly wish a study like this would have came out 10 years ago because I actually took psychology of autism 10 years ago and it was
A whole different world.
So I'm gonna.
Well, you know, it was even worse because I took adult and aging psychology in 2000. And I scoured New York City looking for research articles and stuff and couldn't find it. Columbia University, New York University.
This is why we need research on like all age groups,
One thing I wonder.
like in aging specifically, yeah.
I think there's a young lady back there.
I don't have a question. I just want to say, like, I'm in complete awe of this. This is amazing. Every slide, I'm like, I feel seen. I feel heard. I want to commend you both. This is absolutely outstanding. Thank you.
I'm gonna read through some of these questions and answer them. So one question says, is it common for people to vocally stim in a language you're learning? Have vocal stims in Ukrainian, which is language you're learning. Yes, it seems like that's, we've talked with some of our collaborators. One of them speaks Mandarin at home and prefers stimming in Mandarin because of this, just like the sounds that are in that language. There's a talk earlier on ASL, and I know ASL, and I just feel like a crazy amount of joy being in that world. I think it's because of the ability to stim. So yes.
And sometimes it
It
feels
feels
that.
good in your mouth. Like, my favorite word in Spanish is otorrinolaryngologo, which is ENT.
Cortisol is affected. When I speak as a part-time provider and working with HRV and other that are doing all that stuff. And I would be fascinated to see how much it's suiting to us when we can stick.
Yeah, so we're for early days in this, right? Like there's so little research, but I would love to, you know, have more collaborations to extend to kind of what we're looking at. So we have a more, you know, I think that's a super great.
The cortisol thing is so real.
Yes.
Mine's like a 28.
Mhm.
It's pretty high.
Especially with trauma.
Yes, exactly. And it's like not always just one big traumatic event, right? It's all these multiple little layers and layers that add up over a lifetime. And I think that also is something overlooked in like my population up age wise.
Clinically, also heart rate variability. I've only learned recently through research because that's where my group has some love. Is our heart rate variability as autistic individuals is higher.
It is
For
different.
us. We it's triggered much easier. And we
Yep.
stay higher, much
That fight
longer.
or flight,
Yep.
it's like it's
All
hard to
that.
get out of it.
Yeah, it's huge.
Okay, and so I'm gonna answer two of these questions that we have from the Google form real quick. One is about, did you get to find out about hair pulling stims related to the trichotillomania and that expecting to stim? Yes, we did. People did report hair pulling to stim, and something I do and did, and for a long time also didn't realize was related to that.
Does that include skin picking as well?
So yeah, technically that would be dermatillomania, not trichotillomania, but yes, yes.
Biting the inside of your lip.
Yep.
We talked about that last night.
Yeah. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that we're getting to your kind of open-ended some of the questions that we have for you guys.
But y'all can totally get our info and ask us all you want.
Yeah.
Like,
So
we
I'm
don't
gonna-
want to cut you off.
Yeah, so I'm gonna read these questions and then we can kind of jump around from there. So some things that we wanted to know are, what are your priorities for autism research? What do you want researchers to study? What do you wish researchers or service providers understood about autism or the autism experience? What do you want to know more about regarding autism? Are there any barriers to participating in research you have experienced? And then lastly, just any like general thoughts or feedback on the radar project or research. What do you like about what we're doing? What do you think we should be differently.
How can we improve?
Yeah.
Like, go for it.
Would you bring back things like, I want to make sure okay. So for 100 priorities for research, congratulations on the PhD journey. I studied disability leadership for mine, and there's almost none in any disability specific or disability in general outside of culturally deaf leadership issue. I'd be really curious if there are like consensus traits or approaches to leadership or leading autistic people, people like that they find more preferable or effective. And I just, there's very, very little in that.
Yeah,
I don't know very much.
I don't know.
And it seems like it exclusively right now is about self-advocacy, which is super important, but not about organizational system change, like all the other external ways of leading.
And that's where
Oh, okay.
it's ridiculous how you just hit a passion of mine, so I'm not gonna input on.
I've got something similar in terms of like advancement in leadership and autism, that
Yes.
intersection of leadership and neurodiversity. We don't have role models. We don't have people ahead of us. in
Right.
Our careers. in our
You have
field
to
of study,
create that
and we need that.
representation.
And that's one of the reasons that I really wanted to do this participatory research is, you know, we have people who had never made a survey before, you know, had a high education regional center clients, but, you know, it wasn't that, oh, like you already have this academic background, like trying to create ways to bring other people in, knowing that the fact that I'm able to be in a PhD program, I have a lot of privilege, and then how do I use that to bring more opportunities to bring other people along with.
I keep defaulting to impact, but impact and intention versus recycle and repeat, if you will.
I think the thing that I'm looking for like research is like the current treatment modalities that are used on autistic individuals, especially children and adolescents. And what the effects are of those treatment modalities, and like what other treatment modalities would be a better replacement in supporting an individual in their needs instead of trying to use social control.
Absolutely, and I think that's, all right, so this is kind of what we consider like basic science, right? It's like the very beginning. But I think this has an applied pathway as far as what I see is if we can publish our research that says, hey, you know what, stimming is helpful for all of these reasons, it has social communications, then service providers and people who are developing treatment approaches, therapies, won't see it as a non-functional behavior to be eliminated.
Yeah. They
can start working with it. Okay, how do we maybe replace injurious stims or ones that are less appropriate in a particular setting? But we can use stimming to teach emotional recognition or social skills. And so even though it's basic research at the very beginning, I definitely see it as applied now. Just what you were talking about.
Can I piggyback on you? I'm gonna piggyback on the social skills, and by social skills, we mean like autistic neuro-affirming social skills, not assimilating into an NT lifestyle.
That's what I had.
I wanted to clarify in case.
Literally, my claim to fame was getting the word gorillas officially on my IEP, because that was my main special influences too.
I absolutely
love that. I did not.
Gold star for that.
People, it's an honor thing. Now it's.
I would want that frame.
I think as like an autistic psychologist, the biggest barrier I have, especially working in like a setting where a lot of my students are violent and self-injurious, is there's not a lot of research around how to help and like mentally support those children. Like a lot of times all the mental health supports go to our verbal students, but there's nothing for our non-verbal students. And every time I try to bring up stuff, they'll say it's not an evidence-based practice, but then when you look, there is no evidence-based practices. So,
There's
yeah.
a paper about, you know, going from evidence-based practice to practice-based evidence.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And this is also why, you know, having the autistic community is involved is important because, right, there are a lot of us that were maybe not only speaking for a long portion of our lives or part of our life or intermittently not verbal. And so while we can't speak for anyone else's experience, there are commonalities that autistic people can help bring to the table of like, okay, I don't know specifically what this kid needs, maybe, but if we have shared experiences, we might get closer than just like from the outside, like, oh, I don't know why this kid hits his head. It's well, I know why I do it. Let's see if that has.
It's what we talk about all the time in our meetings. It's the same but different phenomenon.
The whole the whole evidence-based practice thing really hit a nerve with me.
Yeah,
because
we're
I-
gonna go in this order
Oh,
here.
yeah.
I have one from online. I would love to see research around coming up with accessibility standards for autistics and also comparing trauma levels between behaviorist interventions and neurodiversity affirming services.
That is
Oh,
one-
absolutely.
That
would
is
be
a
amazing.
bucket list
That would
for,
be
yeah.
Awesome.
Same page.
You had a question or comment?
So I'm curious to learn more about, trauma and how to help non-speaking people with trauma.
I had two thoughts. One of them was on the graph for kind of reasons that people stim. I was curious about anything pertaining to like a sense of comfort or ease, because I feel like that's
Yeah.
just on my verbal stims like go that
Yeah,
direction.
humming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Content maybe.
Yeah, I
on
think
there
there's
at
some
some point. Having certain-
happy,
Oh, sure,
happy and
something like that.
content. I think.
Okay. And then I would be curious, like research kind of in the direction of like the impact of sort of repression of
Yes.
stimming or like these different,
Yeah,
There's
there's a good amount of research from, it's Caspi et al.
Yes.
About the effects of the harmful effects of yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's rough.
Then I think super interesting, so you researched in a neurodiverse, expert therapist, and basically life changing, so I think something on what practices from therapists are new autistic people find helpful and beneficial, so that other therapists, you know, kind of like, that they can start. What do autistic people who are in therapy find helpful from our therapist?
And that gets to an interest of mine with like looking at autism through a cultural lens and as in like cultural reciprocity, like. Yes, you make accommodations for us because the world's not built for us, but we also know accommodations help everybody, right? So like, it's that reciprocal. That's how I view that and communication, like. You telling me to say this or do this is not communication, like it's a two-way.
Yeah, so in
Bi-directional.
in the last minute, I'm just gonna move us real quick to those resources and links. So if people want to learn more about Radar, the website is linked there. Also the What is Autism essay, you have people in your life that you need to make them understand it. It's there. I
Easy to understand too.
created a toolkit, which on conducting participatory research, if anyone is interested in that. And then, as I mentioned, we have that follow-up, study on stimming. So if you want to tell us what you think about stimming, that survey should be ready to go next week. Hopefully have it ready.
How long are these slides going to be on the AUSM website?
It said it was a year.
A year, okay.
And if there's a short little just mailing list, we can let you know, if you want opportunities to participate in research, to get involved with a collaborator, you want to tell you, updates on the research we're finding. That's also there. As we mentioned, research is messy and it took 2 weeks of going back and forth for them to realize, oh, we didn't put this wording on your approval letter. Oops, our bad.
Our holdup, not yours.
So our study that was supposed to be live isn't until probably Monday. We'll find out. And contact info is also there. We'll have follow-up questions. I'm happy to take whatever question. There's also a contact form on the Radar website that we have. But yeah, I really appreciate you hearing
Thank you all for.
everyone's questions and insight
And
and
engagement.
feedback and encouragement.
Thank y'all. No, I want to clap for all of y'all.
Yeah,
I want to clap for y'all.
absolutely loved it. And I'm happy to hang around up here.
Oh, yeah, I'll hang
Questions
too.
too.
But yeah, like that whole